Alright guys, what's going on? We're like so close to having our fully functional 2D tower defense game. We just finished the last of the UI. And let me go ahead and just open that project. So open up the project we've been working on. And there's the UI we've been working on. It's looking great. And like I said, I'm purposely leaving some stuff out, and I'm going to let you guys do that after this whole session is done with building this 2D game. But now we have this UI, right? We have to connect it all. We have to know that the towers cost money. We have to know that next wave button isn't always showing. It has to be hidden sometimes. And we have to be able to update the escaped enemies and the wave number that we're on. And then, of course, money. We have to use money. We have to subtract from it, add to it. We should probably also add a reward. So when a tower kills an enemy, we collect money so we can buy more towers. All right, so first, let's go to our game manager and start setting up all these variables that we're going to need to connect. So if we go ahead and go into our assets and click on the scripts, just click on scripts and then go to game manager. Here is our game manager, and right now we don't have that many variables up here, and we have to add one for every label that we have. So we need one for our total money. We need one for our next button. And we need one for all of our text, so our enemies that have escaped, and our wave label at the top. And I think that might be it. Let's just start adding stuff, and we'll think of if we run into a problem, we'll add it at the end. So let's see. I'm going to go ahead and put our new variables on the top so we can kind of see them as we work down. Okay, so we need to keep track of waves, right? This game, like, you survive the first wave, you need the next wave, right? So why don't we make let's make a serialized field. And let's do a private integer, and we'll call this total waves. So we're making this serialized so we can adjust it in the inspector later. And for now, let's just set it to 10. We'll have a total wave, like we'll allow a player to, if he survives 10 waves, he wins the game. But we'll make it adjustable, so we can adjust this in the inspector if we need to. All right, so what else do we need? We need a total money label, right? So we need another serialized field. And we'll make this private. And this time it's not going to be a string, it's going to be type text. And we might have to import Unity engine. Well, we might not have to, we have to, using Unity engine.ui. So we need to import UI. It always goes to user for me. Using, there we go. And then we can finish up our text field, and I believe it's, yeah, there it is. So we need a private text, and this will be our total money. And then I'm just going to put LBL so we know it's a label. This is referring to this 10, the 10, the upper left corner, that label. All right. And we also need a wave text label. So that's also at the top. That will be, this one right here. So let's go ahead and make another serialized field and call this private text current wave. Yeah, current wave label. Okay. And then we also need the play button text label. So let's make that serial. No, we don't need, that can be private actually. We'll be setting that in code. So underneath all these serialized fields, let's make a private. Let's make this private text. You know what? Yeah, this is good. Private text, and this is going to be play button label. So when that button pops up, we're going to call it either start, stop, or whatever we want. And that will be good for that. And actually, I just realized we do need a serialized field because we actually have to drag the label object into our inspector. So let's serialize this. All right. And we also need a play button. So we need that serialized as well because we have to drag the button object into it. So private button, and then we'll call this play button. We also need our total escaped enemies label, right? I'm just going to put it underneath the current wave. And this is also a serialized field because we have to connect the UI. So make that a private, and this is also a label, so we need text here. And this is going to be total escaped label. All right, cool. So save that. I'm trying to think. I think we have covered everything. Let me just look. Let's just push this aside. Okay, so the tower buttons we're going to add these labels and the values for them in the tower button script. So we don't need that. We did the next button. We did the escape label. We did the wave label, and we did the total money label. So I think we're good with our variables. Now, what about some private variables that we talked about we're going to have to keep track of? Since like our wave labels and stuff, those are all going to be strings that we set to our label, we're going to actually need a private variable. We're going to need to know the wave number. So we'll initialize that as a 0. We're also going to need a private variable for total money, because like I said, the labels are only for text. And let's set this one to 10. We want our user to start with $10. We also need to keep track of the total escaped. And this is all for our code. And we want this to start off as 0 as well. And we also need to keep track of total escaped for the round. So we'll call that round escaped. And we'll be setting this back to 0 at the end of every round. And the reason we need this is if enemies escape, we need to know, because if they're dead or they're escaped, it's the same thing. If there's no enemies left on the map, we have to end the wave. So we have to keep track of that. And then we also need to keep track of total killed. And that will also be initialized as 0. Okay, and we also need a private variable. We're going to call it, let's call it which enemies to spawn. So you know how we have 3 enemies and all their health is like different rates? Obviously, like the first round, we want the easiest enemies to kill, and maybe even the second round we want the easiest enemies to kill. So we're going to set this to 0, and we have all of our we have our 3 enemies in an array, right? This game object array right here. And we're going to make sure Scully, that's enemy number 2, is set up in array 0, okay? So we want the easiest enemy to spawn first. And then after the first wave, we can change this number. We can change it to 1, and then we can have a random number, a random math function called, and we can randomly spawn enemies between 0 and 2 or 0 and 1, and then that way we don't have to write anything fancier than that, but we can have every single type of enemy spawning. And that's what which enemies to spawn will do. And I think that'll be it'll be pretty cool. All right, and I think we should also have a variable that keeps track of our game state. And I think the best way to do that would probably be with a enumerator. And I'm going to go ahead and put it above this class to make it public to everything. So let's make a public enumerator called game status. We need to know the status of the game. And this is basically going to be for updating our UI. We want to know if it's going to be next, play, game over, or win. Okay, so those are the 4 stages that can happen in our game. And basically, we'll just keep track of changing the game status variable when the state changes. And then all we have to do is check this variable to know how to update our UI. So let's go ahead and do this of type game status. And let's call this current state. And our current state will be called, or we'll set it to game status.play for our current state. So the very first time you load the game, you want like your play button to say play, and you want everything reset. Like the user starts with $10, 0 escaped enemies, and that's what we'll be able to do off this enumerator. All right, I think we should probably connect all of our labels and buttons and all that. So make sure you save this, and let's go back to Unity. And in the hierarchy under the main camera, find our game manager, and we're going to see total money label, our current wave label, all this stuff we need to update now. Okay, so remember how we want enemy 2, since he's the easiest, that's Scully. He doesn't have a helmet on or anything like that. We want him actually in element 0 of this enemies array. So click this little dot and just change it to 2 there. And then element 1, change to enemy 1. We just want to switch those around. And you guys don't have to do it. It's just the way we ended up naming the enemies. Now we're just switching them around because we've changed things. And the reason these 2 are bold is because that means we've changed them here, but not in our prefab. So if you hit apply, they'll actually go away and update the prefab, and they won't be bold anymore. But we want to make sure we're doing all the changes to this game manager because we're not actually pulling from the prefab. We just have it there kind of as backup if we were to delete this one. All right, so let's first drag our total money label. So under our canvas, we have to find I think it was in our score panel. Yep, so this text right here, let's name this money label so we don't get confused. And then also our button, we should probably call this button label because text doesn't really help. So go back to Game Manager, and when we can see this, we need to drag our money label to total money label. And now that one's connected. It's really cool. So all we have to do is set this variable now in our game manager, and it will update our display. Okay, so now we need our current wave label, and that is right here under stats display. Drag that one into current wave. And then also escaped label goes to total escaped label, and that's done. And now we have our play button and our play label, or our play button label. So we want to drag the outside, so the label's inside. We want to make sure we drag this button into, whoop, I unselected Game Manager. So we want to make sure the button, the whole button goes into this play button here, like that. And then we want the label inside of that to go above it to the button label. All right, and then go ahead and hit apply at the top right above transform, just to put it in our prefab. And we now have all of our labels and buttons updated. So that's really cool. So now we can go back to our game manager. Okay, so now that we're back in our game manager, we probably want to do some things like, so we need to have a function to allow us to add money and subtract money, right, to our label. So underneath our register and unregister and destroy enemies, let's go ahead and add money. So public void, let's just call this add money. And all we'll do is pass in an integer of the variable name amount. So this allows us to add money to our label. So all we have to do is, we should make some getters and setters for our labels. So we have our total money and our total label. Okay, so let's make a public getter and setter for total money. So public type integer, and then total money with a capital T, and then get and return total money. And then when we set this, obviously we can just say total money equals value. So that will be the updated value. But we can also set our UI label here. So that would be really cool, right? So what is the name of our label? It is total money label. So we can do total money label dot text equals total money dot toString, and then opening and closing parentheses. And now every time we were to add money, we'll update our UI label at the same time. So that's pretty cool. We can take care of all that in one public variable. So right here, we can just simply call our new public variable with a capital T. All right, so now we can set this to our total money variable that we just set up, and make sure it's the capital T, because then it'll automatically update our label when we set it. And all we have to do is plus equals and then the amount passed in. And that's done. So now let's do the same exact thing for subtract money. Public void subtract money and pass in int and amount. And now we can do the same thing but subtract. So total money minus equals amount. And now that's done. So that UI will get updated every time we call these two functions. Okay, so I think we're good with setting up all the functions that we're going to need to call randomly to subtract and add. There are some things that we should call though. Let's see here. Like our start, well, sorry guys, I'm just not using my mouse right today. So our start method here that gets called when we initialize the game manager, we just have it spawning our enemies right away. But we actually, we want the button to pop up. So we want to actually have a menu and then our button is going to control our enemies spawning, right? So why don't we delete this? We don't need this here. And why don't we, let's see, we need to set our button to being inactive when we first start. And then we're going to call a method to see what game state we're in to know how to show the button and what the label should be. So let's go ahead and say play button dot game object set active, and let's set this equal to false. This will hide the button when we first load the game, and we want false in parentheses. That's why it's yelling at us. So setting this to false right when we play the game will hide the button, the next wave button. And let's run that just to verify. Okay, see, no button, but our other UI is showing up. So that's exactly what we want to do. Okay, so once we have that, let's make a button called show menu. Or, I'm sorry, a method called show menu, okay? And it's going to yell at us because we don't have that made yet. All right, so let's scroll down and let's make this show menu button. Or method, I'm losing it. Void show menu. Okay, and what we want to do here is let's make a switch statement to check our game status. See what we did? We just made that enumerator. So let's do a switch statement. And in parentheses, we want to check our current state. And then opening and closing braces. And our first case, we want to see if the game status is set to game over, and then do a colon. And we can actually, let's see, we can set our play button dot text equal to play again. That makes sense, right? I think so. And this is yelling at us. Oh, right. Play button label. The button doesn't have a text field. All right. So now what else do we need to do? Well, in the future, when we add sounds, we probably want to add a game over sound here. So that will happen. And then I think that's good for this state. And then we want to check for another game status. Let's do next. So if we just completed a wave, we're going to set game status to next. So if there's another wave to come, game status is next, right? So we're going to want the play button label dot text to be equal to next wave. And I think that's good. And then we'll end that one. And then we have another case called game status dot play. So this will be what is called the very first time the game is started. It'll say play. So we obviously want the play button label dot text to say play. And you can make it say play game or whatever you want. And that's good for that one. And then we have one more case called game status. Whoa. Game status dot win. All right. So we should probably change the play button label dot text back to play. And at this point, so that banner that you guys are going to be adding, you would want maybe to add a "you win" text to that banner. And then same with the game over, you could have a game over. And maybe for the wave state, you could hide the banner or show the next wave that they're going to play. The options are there. There's lots of ways you could take this game. And then outside of this, so every time we want to show the menu, we want the button to show. So we can now say play button dot set game object dot set active, and then we'll set this to true. So no matter what case current state is, we are always going to want the button to show if show menu is called. Does that make sense? So let's go ahead and press play just to see if we see the next button. It should say play. And look at that. So since we have game status set to dot play right off the bat, now our button says play and it shows. So that's really cool. Okay, let's finish up setting up our other UI that is going to be required to play. When our button is pressed, we're going to need a price field to pass in so we know what to subtract and if the user can even afford it. So let's open up our script our tower button script. And we don't have much here, right? So we're just going to add another private serialized field. And let's call it private, and it's just going to be an int, and this will call tower price. And then let's make a public getter and a capital T for tower, so it's not the same. And let's go ahead and just return tower price with a lowercase t. All right, so if we save this, let's go ahead and find our buttons. So if we click on our night, so go into the hierarchy here, come down through canvas, and then inside the tower panel, if you click on night button, if we scroll down, we're going to see the tower price now. And I'm just going to match this to our label. So this is going to be 15. And then apply this so it takes over the prefab. And then go to the castle one, same thing, make this one 10 and apply it to the prefab. And then the rock button, go ahead and make this one 5 and also apply it. And our buttons are set up now with tower prices. Okay, now remember we need an award amount. So every time an enemy is killed, we want to give the user money, right? So why don't we open up our script, our enemy script, and let's add a variable. It'll be a serialized field. Right underneath health points is good. So let's do serialized field, private int, and let's call this reward amount. All right, so that will do. And let's see. Yeah. So now we can set each enemy's reward amount in our inspector. So if we save this and let's go to our inspector, and under our assets folder in our prefabs, let's find our enemies. And since enemy 1 is the second strongest one, let's go down here with award amount, and I awarded $2 for that one. So go ahead and go to enemy 2 then, who is our weakest. He's the easiest to kill. I made his reward amount $1. And then enemy 3 will be $3. And I kind of just copied their health. So if their health is 300, 3 coins. Enemy 2 health was 100, so 1 coin. And then enemy 1 was 200, so I made it 2 coins, or $2. And so now when our enemy dies, we can add to our score or our bank account, whatever you want to call it. Now, I'm going to call this video done for now because our next video, we're going to be diving a lot into like the logic. So a lot of if-else blocks, and we're going to have to think a lot about what state the game is in. So we're going to need fresh brains for this one. But right before we leave, I want to just show you, I want to implement, so right now if we select a tower, we can't unselect it. Like we're forced, we've already bought it. We can't do anything but place it, right? I want to show you how we can drop the tower with the, using the escape button. So that's a great feature that is quick and we can add it right now. So let's go ahead and open our game manager. And let's scroll down, and I guess towards the bottom, it can go underneath show menu. Let's do a private void and call this handle escape. And this is just a nice feature. We wouldn't have to do it, but you don't want to make your user forced to buy something if he decides at the last minute not to. So we want an if statement, and we're going to look for input dot get key down, and we're going to look for the key code dot escape, and it's all built in. Whoop, escape. There we go. It's all built in already for us, and we're just using it. So if the escape key is down, we can now call other functions, and since our tower manager is a singleton, we can call tower manager dot instance. Oh man, I'm struggling with typing tonight. Dot instance. And let's go ahead and say disable drag sprite. All right. So that will stop it from dragging. But now that object is still connected to our mouse. So if we clicked, it would still place the tower, and that we don't want that. So now we have to set the tower manager dot instance. We need the button. So tower button. I don't remember what we called it. So let's go into tower manager. Okay, we called it tower button pressed. So we need to set tower button. Oh, you know, we have to make a public getter so we can retrieve our button. That's why I can't find it. So let's go ahead and go into our tower manager. And here, yeah, our tower button is private. So let's make this public. And if you want, just because we need to set it from our game manager, so we can just do this. We can do get semicolon, set semicolon, and then closing brackets. And that creates a one-line getter and setter if you don't want to do anything special inside either of those functions. So there we go. We have our getter and setter for our button pushed. And now we'll be able to access it. Tower button pressed, and we want to set this equal to null. We don't want a game object set to it, so if the user clicks after we hit escape, nothing will happen, or it will null out the tower selected, right? Okay, so now we have to call handle escape, and we need to do that from update. And we might not even have our update. We deleted our update. So underneath start, do void update closing, opening and closing parentheses, and then curly braces. And let's just call handle escape, opening and closing parentheses. And now save it, and let's play the game and try it just to see. So if I click, I'm dragging around. If I press escape, now it's gone and I can't build a tower. So that's pretty cool. A little feature. I don't want to drain you too much. So yeah, we're going to call this video done because the next video we're going to be really diving into like the logic under the hood of the game. And so we're going to have our brains sharp and ready to think through everything, that all the steps that we have to check for, from, you know, seeing how many enemies have escaped, what wave we are on, is it a game over or is it a next wave, you know, so all that stuff. So we'll call this video done. We have a lot set up ready for it. Like, we're so close to finishing this game off. I'm excited for it. So I will see you guys shortly.